afternoon and good morning to Svitlana. And this is Summer Chen. I am the Chief Editor of Taiwan VoxCheck Center. We are so glad to see you again. And I think yesterday was the first panel of this forum on fact-checking in Asia. It was a really good warm-up. We are glad to learn a lot from James Svitlchenko. And today, it's our honor to have Svitlana Slipchenko to be our keynote speaker. She is the head of VoxCheck, and VoxCheck is one of the Ukrainian fact-checking organizations. And Svitlana is from Kyiv and to connect with us. So Svitlana, would you please say hello to our audience?
Hello to everyone. It's really glad to see and to hear you, Summer, and thank you once again for inviting to this forum, and thank you everyone who wants to join this forum and to hear my presentation and my speech about how Russian propaganda acts in Ukraine, and also how it loses in informational war in Ukraine on this informational battlefield. Thank you a lot for your support and assistance, and for this possibility to talk to the wide community audience, to the international audience, and to tell about the situation in Ukraine.
Thank you, Svitlana. And Svitlana is from Kyiv, and we are going to have 3 sections. And each section, we will play a pre-recording video from Svitlana. I think because of the process, we pre-recording those videos on May, and then now it's June, and so I think there are many updated status. So first of all, Svitlana, would you please describe about the current status that you are conquered in Kyiv?
Well, mostly it's quiet in Kyiv. Now Russian army is quite far away from Kyiv, but in February and in March, Russian army was really close to Kyiv. It was more dangerous situation than now. Nevertheless, we still have risks of missile attacks, and as I told Summer before the start of this panel, that just few days ago, Kyiv was once again under missile attacks, and it was quite near me, in the neighbor district from me. I saw everything pretty well from my home, from my window, but many people in Kyiv are still acting as before war. I mean, they come back to their business, come back to their daily routine. It's it even seems like Kyiv is come back to the full life, and many people come back to Ukraine and to Kyiv. We still have some air alarms. It means that in case of air alarm, we are under risk of attacks, and we have to go to the shelters, or at least sitting in the corridors of our apartments, as it's a more safety place than just sitting near your window. Unfortunately, some people ignoring air alarms, but the main positive thing is that Kyiv, as a capital of Ukraine, seems to come back to life and recover from the active battlefield that was in February and March.
好，那我们今天就开始今天的论坛，然后我要麻烦 Kevin 开始播今天的影片。那待会在播影片的同时，如果大家看了有什么问题，或者是心得，或者是有任何想要分享的，都可以在留言区，那用中文或英文打字给我们都可以。OK， 好，那就麻烦 Kevin。
Hello to everyone. My name is Svitlana Slipchenko. I'm head of VoxCheck. It's a fact-checking organization from Ukraine. And I'm going to tell you how we are fighting against Russian propaganda during the ongoing war. So to begin with, I would like to tell you about our organizational structure. Actually, VoxCheck is a fact-checking unit of non-governmental organization Vox Ukraine. Vox Ukraine started its activity since 2014 as a bloc of Ukrainian economists who mostly works abroad and who tried to deliver to the Ukrainian government the best economic decisions after the revolution of dignity that we had in 2013-2015. After the creation of Bloc, more and more people decided to join Vox Ukraine, and we transformed from Bloc to the analytical center that now consists of several projects. You can see that the main projects now are VoxCheck. We started our work in 2016. Also, Vox Ukraine has project Index of Monitoring of Reforms, or it's easier to call the Reform Index. It means that experts calculating how reforms are performing in Ukraine. And also we are developing the economic journalism in Ukraine by connecting with local journalists and providing them with best economic decisions and explainers about ongoing reforms. But I, as a representative of VoxCheck, would like to tell you more about our fact-checking work. So, since the March 2018, VoxCheck became a member of International Fact-Checking Network. And 2 years after that, in March 2020, we became the partners of Meta, more known as Facebook, as fact-checkers for third-party fact-checking program. Actually, since March 2020, we debunked more than 2,000 fakes about almost everything you can only imagine yourself. So it's sure in 2020 and 2021 we worked mostly on debunking fakes about COVID-19, about vaccination and other health issues, but also we debunked many fakes about reforms, about economic of Ukraine, about some false quotations of people. Well, almost everything you can only imagine. But as fact-checkers and as members of International Fact-Checking Network, we have some ethical rules. So each of VoxCheck analysts do not belong to any political party and does not represent someone's interests. We are not funded by political forces. We also using the editorial process to each of our article. It means that at least 2 representatives from editorial board should review our articles before they will be published on our website. And also, if we have some conflict of interest, we reveal them. But in fact, on practice, we didn't ever meet that situation. So what we were doing before the war started? before the war started, VoxCheck was mostly concentrated on fact-checking of our Ukrainian politicians' statements. And actually in Ukraine, we are the only one fact-checking organization who fact-check what Ukrainian politicians say. We were the first in this in Ukraine, and we saw that some fact-checking initiatives also tried to fact-check what our politicians say, but their methodology were more weak. They unfortunately made mistakes, and we still the fragments of fact-checking of politician statements. Also, as I have already mentioned, we started the partnership with Meta in third-party fact-checking program. So before the war started, we debunked many fakes about COVID-19 and many other topics. Also, since the August 20th and 21, we started countering Russian disinformation by monitoring pro-Russian media in Ukraine. It's actually was a big problem of Ukraine that some media, some political parties, some bloggers, journalists, experts, they were pro-Russian. They help Russia to share its propaganda in Ukraine. That is why we started a small internal project with countering what pro-Russian media are writing about Ukraine and how they manipulate and lie about what's going on in Ukraine. And this experience helps us a lot now in countering Russian disinformation narratives. Also, we prepared a lot of explainers about reforms. It was articles that helped any Ukrainian to understand what's going on actually in Ukraine, how to understand medical reform, land reform, decentralization, public finances, anything that actually influence people's life, but seems to difficult to understand just by reading news or listening to the experts who have some conflicts of interests or who just trying to show the interest of some person or political party. So we prepared such explainers to understand people with to explain people with easy words what actually is going on in Ukraine and its economy. And finally, we had internship program and provide some other education activities to teach people how to fact check what someone say from TV, or how to increase the media literacy, how to use the best primary sources of fact-checked information, and so on. But since the war started, we had to change many of other activities and concentrate on some other topics. Actually, now we do not fact-check politician statements, but, for instance, we are still fact-checking what Vladimir Putin says, because his lies still affect not only Russian audience, but also international audience and partly Ukrainian audience. We can also fact-check some experts, some journalists who still share Russian propaganda narratives in Ukrainian informational field. We still debunk fakes, but now 99% of all fakes that we are debunking in a third-party fact-checking program of Facebook are about the ongoing war. We also still counter in Russian disinformation, but now we change the sources where we monitoring this Russian disinformation. It's not about pro-Russian medias now, but about Russian media and social networks. Also, we still preparing the explainers, but not about reforms, but mostly about the ongoing war. For instance, how to better calculate the losses of Russian army, or about the war crimes made by Russia. And just yesterday, on the 9th of May, we started new internship program. So now we are waiting for CVs from people who want to learn how to fact-check information even during the wartime. But the changes in VoxCheck is not only about the changes in previous activities, it's also about changes and some new things that we are doing now. So as I told you, now we're monitoring not pro-Russian media, but Russian Telegram channels and media, and we see hundreds of disinformation cases and fakes per day that come in from these sources. Also, we started to provide our audience with checked news and the main victories. VoxCheck is known among its own audience as fact-checker. And when we provide the audience with news, people can be sure that these news are they have no false information, they have no manipulation. It's absolutely truthful news, and it's what we think is important now, to provide people with this truthful news. And also war, it's time when people are really stressed, when they are sad about the destroying of Ukrainian cities and killing of Ukrainians. So we decided to provide our audience with more positive news, with more positive facts, even during the war. That is why we decided to count the main victories of not only Ukrainian armed forces, but also our victories on, for instance, diplomacy frontline, on cyber frontline, and about some positive decisions made by our government, about the support and assistance from our partners. But we made we explain all these victories not only in text format, not only in our social media, but we also started the podcast, and we called it Victories. Actually, we thought over podcast even before the war started, but then we thought about podcast about anti-corruption activities. But actually now corruption is not on time, so we decided to make the podcast about main positive news per day. Going further, with monitoring of Russian Telegram channels and media, we're trying to summarize all the fakes and disinformation cases to the narratives. And we are trying to analyze the methods that Russian propaganda use to impact not only its audience, but also European and Ukrainian audience. We're trying to search for some provocations that Russia show us in their Telegram channels and media. And based on this analysis of narratives and methods of Russian propaganda, we now preparing the recommendations for increasing of media literacy of Ukrainians during the war. These recommendations we share not only through our social networks, we also growed our media presence that helps us now to show the main narratives and methods of Russian propaganda to the wide audience through TV channels, through radio broadcasting and through some online media in Ukraine. And finally, it's not always interesting for people to read text or listen to the podcasts or watching TV or listen to the radio. That is why we decided to create more and more infographics and some interesting videos that helps people to understand main numbers of that war. For instance, the main numbers about Russian army losses during the war, the main numbers of the same victories, or something about international assistance to Ukraine. So it's just another presentation of content, these infographics, but in fact it's reach more audience than just texts. Also during the war, we have some changes in our team, and the first, of course, it's changes in workflow and work schedule. Now, fighting Russian disinformation, we have to work overtime. It's like 24/7 work schedule, but in fact, people can't work 24/7. That is why we changed our work schedule and changed the team roles. During the war, I saw that some of our analysts who previously only debunk fakes or fact-check the politicians' statements now can write a really good pieces of news. So why not to allow people to write the pieces of news if they can do that? But actually someone still has to fact check some Facebook posts and debunk fakes and monitoring Russian propaganda. That is why we changed the roles in team and the accents, what have to do what. And about the changes in work schedule, actually now in Ukraine, we do not have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then weekends on Saturday and Sunday. We have 75, 76, and we'll have 77 and so on days of war. That is why we have to work every day, we have to work a lot, but people need to have some weekends. So someone can take a weekend if any other activity will going on by someone another in our team. Another very important issue is team members and their families' safety. That is why some of our team members evacuated from Kiev and some other Ukrainian cities to the west of Ukraine. Unfortunately, west of Ukraine is also under missiles attacks, but these missiles attacks are much lower than, for instance, in Kiev. And also the Russian army didn't take too close to west of Ukraine than to Kiev, for instance. So this evacuation, we had to do that to provide our team with more safety places. And as about their family's safety, unfortunately, we have one case. My colleague has family in the city that is under temporary occupation right now. And the problem is that my colleague and her mother have the same last name. And then we think that occupants can just Google and find how my colleague debunk Russian disinformation and how she fact-check what Russian president says, and she writes that she says only lies. And then they can harm her mother with the same last name in this occupied city. That is why we decided to we decided to not show the team information on our website and who the author of which article, just to keep our team in safety and do not be attacked informationally or in some more methods by Russian occupants. As I told you, we have more job, we have to more work overtime, so we have to rethink about motivation. And the motivation for me is that our armed forces also doesn't have any weekends. They can't protect and defend our country only on working days and then have Saturday and Sunday as weekends. It's the one point of motivation for us, that we are also on the informational front line. We have to protect our country and Ukrainians from Russian propaganda. That is why we, as the armed forces, we cannot just take weekends and do not do anything just one day. And another motivation is that when we show how Russia lies, how it spread its provocations and how it's tried to demoralize the Ukrainians, we can save someone's life. For instance, when we provide people with information that Russian armed forces are coming closer to some city and people have to be evacuated from that city, and if just at least one person decided to save her and his life and evacuate somewhere, for instance, to the west of Ukraine, these things that we saved someone's life motivate us also a lot. And finally, before the war started, we have regular formal calls where we planned our work schedule and our main tasks. But now we switched to more informal calls where we can just ask each other, how are you? Are you in safety? What are you feeling now? And how can we help you? And these informal calls also show how we support each other and that we can count on each other in this really critical situation. So that's all about our team changes. It's all about the first part of my presentation. So maybe we can switch to the questions and then go on to the narratives.
Okay, thank you. It's the first piece of our video. And would you please raise your hand or just leave your question on the chat area? So I got the message from静松可以直接打开麦克风来问您的问题。
好，谢谢 Summer。我想问一下，就是在战争之前，他主要查核的可能是国内政治人物的言行是否符合事实嘛？那战争开打之后，主要是希望能够破除俄国的不实宣传。那因为像这样的查核机构，其实很要小心的，就是希望能够跟政府就是至少界限要能够维持住，那不然很容易被当作是政府的传声筒。那在这个过程中，因为当国家在交战的时候，是不是某方面你很难再去针对自己国家的政治人物做出进一步的查核，因为好像必须要一致对外嘛。那这个时候你说国防部长可能讲的东西不正确，好像就会变成不爱国了。所以这个时候是不是只能一切矛头对外？
And before asking a question, Jin Song, would you like to introduce yourself and turn on your screen and introduce yourself?
好，大家好，我是何劲松，我现在在中时新闻网服务。
Okay. And Huiyan, would you like to translate for Jin Song?
Okay, this is Huiyan from Taiwan Fact Check Center. So, Mr. Jin Song asked, as you say, before the war broke out, you also fact check Ukrainian politician, but now you shift your focus to Russian propaganda or Russian news outlet. And his question is it difficult now to really fact check maybe some falsehood or some misinformation coming from Ukraine side? Because maybe if you do so, then maybe you are criticized that you don't really love or support your country. And how have you handled this kind of situation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Actually, sometimes we still have to fact check also what Ukrainians so-called experts say, or fact check some Ukrainian news pieces because they are still spread not disinformation, but I would better call it misinformation, especially when it comes to photos and videos that illustrates some news pieces. We see many news articles that comes from Ukrainian media, not pro-Russian, only Ukrainian medias, that uses absolutely false photos to illustrate their news. I think they do it to make their news more clickable, just to make people want more to click on that news and to read it, or even not to read because it also has really emotional title, so people just want to share it before checking or even before reading this news. As about fact-checking of Ukrainian politicians, actually before the war started, we had a lot of talk shows on TV where Ukrainian politicians could spread their lies and manipulations, just to receive more popularity, more audience, and then receive more voices on the elections. Now our TV also changed. Now we don't have any TV shows, we do not have many interviews with Ukrainian politicians. It's like a non-stop news marathon that is broadcasting 24/7. So it's even almost nothing to check from Ukrainian politicians. Nevertheless, now after more than 100 days of war, after 3 months of war, we see that some politicians are coming back to their politician battlefield. They are still preparing to the upcoming elections. They are going to be in 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, they are going to now receiving more and more popularity among Ukrainian audience. So sometimes they are trying to not manipulate, but to receive more attention from Ukrainian audience by spreading not taking news from the front line. And sometimes it's disruptive because they are sharing incorrect information about the situation on the front line. Sometimes they are trying to show the places of battlefield or the places of missiles attacks that are in fact forbidden, because if you show the place of missile attack in a few minutes after that, you can help Russia to correct their fire. So they understand if they could harm any our building or not, and it's like a help for our enemy. It's not useful information for Ukrainians, in fact. So what I'm thinking about that we are going to come back to fact check of Ukrainian politicians, but a few months later, because now it's still the transformation in informational field, in TV broadcasting, and it's still some changes in how Ukrainian politicians can be represented among the Ukrainian audience.
Okay. Thank you. And the next audience want to ask a question is Professor 戴瑜慧老师。
Hello. Hi. First of all, I want to express my admiration for your hard work. And I have two questions. First, has there been any change in the way of propaganda in Russia? And the second question is, what kind of threats and concerns do workers face in addition to threats to your families?
Thank you for your questions. So first, about the changes in Russian propaganda. To be honest, we see the only change is that now we face more Russian propaganda than before the war started. And it's not about more topics and more narratives, it's just about more messages that are coming day per day from all Russian communication channels like TV, Telegram, other social networks, Russian propagandist experts, and so on. The narratives are absolutely the same. Russia claiming for years that Ukraine is a failed state, is a illiberal state that only create censorship for Russians, that it's a civil war in Ukraine. It's not a full-scale war, just a civil war in Ukraine. Russia is still claiming that it's Ukrainians who kill other Ukrainians in the eastern Ukraine. And these topics did not change a lot since 2014, since Russia occupied the eastern part of Ukraine and also Crimea in the south of Ukraine. Only change really, it's about that there are so many messages per day, it's hundreds messages per day. As about your second question about, did I understand it correct? It's about some issues in our...
Yeah, those threats to fact-check organization workers, besides like your family members are threatened by the military, and other kinds of threats or concerns that might make fact-check workers hard to continue their work.
Really, the biggest danger that comes to our worker, it's the danger for their life. If, for instance, their family or they are living in occupied territories, and then occupants can just find out that they are fighting Russian propaganda. The other risk is the risk if we are not going to the shelters during air alarms, and we are not taking care about our life. So nevertheless, I hope that my colleagues are still taking care about their safety, and also about motivation and about the importance of what we are doing. Of course, it works not all the time that, as I told, we can save someone's life by showing Russian provocations and dangers, and the reach that we receive, and also the understanding that we are also fighters on informational front. There is, of course, also some economic issues. Of course, now, in case of war, our economy is falling, and we are And Ukrainian economists and also international economists are forecasting that there is going to be a really huge fall of Ukrainian economy. That is why we have a great raise of prices for food. We have a deficit of fuel, and what is more important, that it's now really hard to find a job because many businesses stopped. It's really hard to even find a paid job, because in some cases people are still working, but they just do not receive their salary because their employers cannot pay to them. That is why another motivation is really simple, that our analysts just have a stable work and they are stable paid for their job, and they do not have risk, at least in the nearest time, to lose that job and to lose their income, and they can carry on their life as before the war started. So this a kind of stability of financial assistance also help our workers not to leave that job and to carry on that, because they understand that is one of the most appropriate ways now to just receive money for what they are doing, because really many people now are losing their job and they cannot find another. So it's like, it's a little bit cynical maybe to say that people are working just for money, but no, they just working for some kind of stability.
Yeah, people have to survive first. Well,
yeah, of course, it's about survival. We have a kind of similar situation, not about VoxCheck, but about Ukrainians at all. The Ukrainians in occupied territories. We can, as Ukrainians, promote them not to work with occupants and not to hire to their job, not to receive the humanitarian aid from them, not to receive food from them, but in fact, yes, that people just need to survive. That is why they can not to collaborate with occupants as far as they have their own money and they can receive food, water, it's even about clear water and about food. But when we have the shortage, the deficit of that all, the people on the occupied territories have to collaborate with occupants just to stay alive. Unfortunately, we have such situation in southern Ukraine and in some cities of eastern Ukraine, where is now the most hottest battlefields and that are now occupied.
thank you. And we all stand with Ukraine.
Thank you a lot for your support. That's really important for us to feel that support from a big international community.
Thank you, Professor Dai, and thank you, Svitlana. And we are going to end this section. So the last question will be Gao Chongjian. And would you please introduce yourself and then ask your question. And after this question, we are going to play the second video.
Thanks, Summer. Thanks for the presentation, which is very informative. So I'm Kinko, co-founder of Litecoin, which is a decentralized publishing infrastructure for people to publish their articles immutably. So as I'm pretty sure you know, like from Hong Kong, like we are also facing a lot of disinformation from some government, like friend of Russia. Some people think that it's not enough to do fact-checking. Like fact-checking is like a defense, and they want to attack because they see it as a information war. So it's not what I propose or prefer, but some people would like make disinformation proactively on the other side. So I wonder if you observe the same pattern in Ukraine, like some people don't want to just clarify like what's wrong, but want to be proactive in making like false information over the enemy as well?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, I'm totally agree that fact check is not enough. And also as a fact checkers and in collaboration even with journalists and mass media, we can create a counter narratives that really helps to fight Russian propaganda and any other kind of propaganda. It's like we have one false narrative that is coming from our enemy, and we can create another narrative and spread it wildly just to people could face more factual and more correct information than the false information. For instance, we have now another problem in Ukraine. It's a problem of internally displaced people who have to evacuate from eastern or south Ukraine to western Ukraine or to Kiev, for instance, also. And this group of people also are the aim of Russian propaganda and the aim of false narratives. There are some false narratives. The one is about that internally displaced people will destroy the economy of those regions where they are evacuated. And another false narrative that these people are going to meet many problems after evacuation. They won't be welcomed there, and that is why they should not evacuate from the places of battlefield or from occupied territories. And just by saying no, this is false, we are not make these people evacuate to save their life. We have to create another counter narratives to motivate them to evacuate. For instance, show some success stories about those internally displaced people who leave places of battlefield 3 months ago, and now they are, for instance, starting a new business on Western Ukraine, and they can produce something, sell something, and even receive a great income in this situation. Another positive story that we can share is the story about assistance of help that people are going to receive on Western Ukraine after evacuation. So by creating these counter narratives and by making they mass widespread in Ukrainian media, we can reach more audience. And it's also not only about counter narratives, it's also about positive narratives, because mostly Russian propaganda, it's about some negative facts, negative things. And when people are bored from some negatives, they really need to see something positive, especially in this hard situation. So I think this combination of counter narrative and positive facts can affect people even more than just fact-checked facts, and change their minds, their decisions, and also increase their resistance to the false information that they might meet. For instance, a person firstly read some good story about an internally displaced people who create its own business on Western Ukraine, and then this person meets propaganda about how internally displaced people are ruining the economy of Western regions of Ukraine. And if a person firstly met the information about some positive thing, about how in fact internally displaced people are not destroying economy, then we hope that this person will not believe in lie about that they are destroying the economy of other regions. I guess it can work so, and I hope I answered your question.